Welcome to today's webinar, Increase Student Access and Success in CTE and STEM Non-Traditional Career Pathways, with Ben Williams, Dianna Williams, Cheri Carson, Mary Jo Wilhelm, and Ken Morris, Jr. My name is Greg Nagy, and I am from The Ohio State University and provide technical support for the STEM Equity Pipeline Project along with Freda Walker. Before we start the presentation, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items for this webinar. This webinar is scheduled to last roughly 1 hour and 30 minutes and is being recorded in order to view this presentation in its entirety later. The recorded webinar will be available in the next few days on the napeequity.org website. As you've already found out, you'll be watching the presenters present slides through the Adobe Connect interface while listening to them talk over your computer speakers or your phone. You will also be able to interact using the chat pod. All the participants' microphones and telephones have been automatically muted. If you would like, you can make the presentation larger for just your screen by clicking the full screen button at the top of your Adobe Connect window. Click it again to return to the normal screen. You can also download resources from the Documents to Download pod. Click on the file you want to download and then click the Download Files button. This will open the file as a link in a different tab in your browser. The presenters will answer most questions after the presentation. However, we can take questions at any time. This is how we take questions. At any time during the presentation, you may submit a question by typing your question in the chat pod of the Adobe Connect window. We will read and respond to these questions at the end of the presentation. I'd like to start the webinar by introducing Freda Walker, consultant for the STEM Equity Pipeline Project. Freda?
Thank you, Greg, and welcome to everyone. I'm going to move us to present mode, so the survey questions at the bottom will disappear. Here we go. The funding for this webinar is from NAEP and also from the National Science Foundation. We appreciate their support, and the webinars that we have are complimentary for all of you that are attending. We archive the webinars on the napeequity.org website. You can go there and look at any of the past webinars. You can also see them on YouTube. We have a certificate of completion at the end of the webinar. When you fill out the evaluation survey, then it will pop up and you can download it, put your name in, and use that for your personal or professional use. Also, a reminder, as Greg said, we have 4 documents. They are the webinar handout, which is number 1. There is a number 2 that talks about all the NAEP services. There's a number 3 that talks about root causes that Ben will talk about during the presentation today. And the 4th one is an article about PIPE. So when you click on those, they will pop up in another window and you can download them to your computer. As a reminder, the question and answers will happen after the presentation, and we'd like for you to use the chat function during the presentation to post your questions, and sometimes they will be answered by any of the presenters, and also we will ask them at the end of the presentation. Next, I'd like to introduce Ben Williams, who is the Director of Special Projects for NAEP.
Great. Thank you so much, Freda. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who is joining us today. We are delighted to have you with us and excited to share with you some of the great work that's happening around the country utilizing the program improvement process for equity to identify and close equity gaps in the participation and completion of students in programs that lead to high-skill, high-wage, and high-demand careers, especially those leading to what we call non-traditional occupations. And so, as Freda said, there are materials that each of you can download that will help to complement the information that we're sharing in today's webinar. And I'm delighted to be joined today by colleagues who are doing great work around the country, and very pleased that you have the opportunity to hear from them directly. So before we get into some of the work that's been happening, I first want to outline what we're going to be focusing our
efforts on today, and that is first introducing and then applying the key steps of NAEP's program improvement process for equity, which will help us in identifying and addressing equity gaps through the lens of gender, race and ethnicity, and special populations, and as I'll talk about, also through an intersectional lens in looking at each of those demographics and the participation and completion of students in CTE and STEM programs that lead to non-traditional occupations. We're going to explore specific examples from the field as to effective practices in implementing these types of strategies and using PIPE to really lead to a greater understanding of students' experiences and how to remove barriers to students' access and success in CTE and STEM. And our goal is that you can also, each of you, identify 1 to 2 specific action steps that you might take at your institution or in your state based on what you've learned today, the conversation that we've had with those who are doing the work in the field, as well as those who are engaged in the webinar. And so as Freda mentioned, we'll use the chat function at different points. I'll give prompts that will give us the opportunity to do some brainstorming and sharing. And then we'll have some time at the end of the webinar for a more open Q&A that Freda will help to facilitate for us. So let me first tell you briefly about who we are. So the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity is a professional alliance of state agencies, workforce development agencies, individual institutions, which can include secondary institutions, secondary school districts, as well as community colleges, universities, and business and industry partners, whose focus is on building educators' capacity to implement effective solutions to increase student access, educational equity, and ultimately workforce diversity. Our work revolves around technical assistance to our 38 state members, as well as the hundreds of affiliate and individual members we have, through professional development, through assistance in work relative to Perkins implementation, ESSA implementation, and other programs. We also do research and evaluation and public policy and advocacy, especially relative to legislation focused on education and the workforce. As you can see, there are 38 state members and opportunities for those who are not yet members to engage with NAEP. And if you want to learn more about membership with NAEP, you can click on our website, napequity.org, and click on the membership information. We're happy to provide additional information to you as well. But today's focus is really coming out of a National Science Foundation funded grant that NAEP has been implementing. We're actually in the 10th year of 10 years of this program. So the first 5 years were between 2007 and 2012, called STEM Equity Pipeline 1.0, and then STEM Equity Pipeline 2.0 has been since 2012 and through this year, actually ending at the end of September. And through this process, we've been able to work with 20 states to first, as you can see from these goals, build the formal education's capacity through high-quality professional development focused on gender equity and STEM education, in many cases through career technical education, institutionalize those implemented strategies by connecting those outcomes to existing accountability systems, in particular the Perkins accountability systems, where we have the non-traditional participation and non-traditional completion, which we'll talk about in a minute, and broaden the commitment to gender equity and STEM education. There is a national component, which includes our National Summit for Educational Equity and the Leadership Institute, where we had 17 states participate just a couple of weeks ago. State leadership and state sustainability efforts in each of the states who has implemented this project, and then local level work where there are pilot sites who are implementing this process. Who we will be hearing from today includes those who've been engaged in work that was an extension of this in states like Iowa and Ohio, as well as those who've engaged in this work through state-level initiatives that have been informed by this grant and this process, including Nevada and Oregon. And so you can see here are all the different states who've participated in the project, and you may see your own state there. So the process we employ in this work, and in particular in our conversation today, is called the Program Improvement Process for Equity. And what I'm going to do is walk through each step of this process, and then we'll hear from colleagues in the field as to how they use that process to improve student access and outcomes for students in programs that lead to non-traditional occupations through CTE, through career technical education. So the first step is to organize a team, and that team is typically made up of administrators, instructors, teachers, faculty from the institution that is the main site, can include partners from institutions that are in the pipeline, if you will. So that could be, if you're starting with a secondary institution, that could be partners from a middle school or partners from a community college or both. Counselors, both at that institution, at the home institution, as well as peer institutions, school counselors, academic advisors, admissions counselors, as well as community partners and other business and industry partners, who can then work together to look at the local context and use this process to first identify equity gaps in the participation, performance, and completion of students in programs that lead to non-traditional occupations, and then be able to address those using this process. And so when we think about the programs of focus, and we think about the 16 career clusters in career technical education, 7 of those career clusters could be defined within a larger category of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, especially when we think of where the high-skill, high-wage, high-demand career pathways are. When you think about architecture and construction, agriculture, food, and natural resources, information technology, manufacturing, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which would include engineering technology pathways, as well as transportation, distribution, logistics. Let me ask of the group, which gender do you think is most underrepresented in those pathways? Women or men? And go ahead and put that in your type under chat. And you can women, absolutely. And when you think about high-skill, high-wage, high-demand career pathways through career technical education that lead into those STEM jobs that are middle-income jobs, high-demand areas, many of those are jobs where women are still grossly underrepresented. And so in Perkins, we're required to set targets and meet those targets both at the state level and the local level relative to the participation and completion of students in programs that lead to non-traditional occupations, or those occupations with fewer than 25% of that gender represented in the workforce. So we were talking about those 6 career clusters. When we think about health science, who's underrepresented through CTE and health sciences, men or women? Men, yes, and especially men of color. And so that's why it's important for us to think not only through the lens of gender, but to look through the lens of race and ethnicity as well as special population. And so with Perkins, when we set these targets, when we're looking to meet these targets, it gives us the opportunity to look closely at data, disaggregated by gender, disaggregated by race and ethnicity, and also disaggregated by what we call in Perkins special populations, which include students who are pursuing programs that lead to non-traditional occupations, as well as students who are considered economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, those who are English language learners, displaced homemakers, and single parents. And then to look at the intersection of those demographics to see where there are specific gaps in the participation of students as compared to the overall institution or the community, or especially where those high-skill, high-wage, high-demand career pathways are. We want to think about it in the current context, but we also want to look at it at the local level and then look at that over time. So what we do in PIPE is we capture those data by getting those from each of the institutions with whom we're working or from the state, and then we encapsulate that in a data dashboard that allows us to be able to filter that information and be able to look at those specific programs and identify where those equity gaps are. So when you think about those pathways at your institution, in your district, in your state, where do you see the largest equity gaps in the participation of students in programs especially, let's say, those that lead to the high-skill, high-wage, high-demand careers. So one we'll be hearing about today will be participation gaps in girls' participation in welding programs at the high school level, women's participation in welding programs at the post-secondary level. So still only 4.8% of welders are women. What other gaps do you expect to see? Yes, so participation of women in IT pathways, again, especially women of color. Women in construction, yes. Construction sciences, construction management, skilled trades, automotive, all the different areas in automotive, auto body, automotive technician. Those programs that fall within transportation, distribution, logistics, CAD, which is an important pathway into engineering technologies, architecture, other programs. CAD's a great example of something that you can do typically through a short-term certificate that can then be stackable into other. Yes, men in elementary education. What we know is that in the case of elementary education or early childhood education for men who find that those fields are a great fit for them, it's often later in life because there's a strong cultural press away from men pursuing those programs, even though very high level of satisfaction and very, very positive role models to young people. Yep, and men in preschool as well. Excellent. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And please continue to share your thoughts as we work through today in this chat area. So in PIPE, by first organizing the team who can look at the local context and be able to speak to the dynamics within that community, and also that team needs to include those who can make important decisions about priorities, about what might be realistic in terms of strategies and how resources could be allocated, and then use that information to explore the data through the lens that we've talked about, through a disaggregating data at the program level to identify these equity gaps. That's our starting point. Then we know what the reality is, where those gaps lie. Then what we want to do is discover, uncover, identify what are the root causes, what are the key barriers to students entering into and pursuing these programs. And so when you think about these pathways, and especially the pathways that our colleagues have indicated in the chat, what do you think are the key barriers to students pursuing these programs at either the secondary or post-secondary level? Please go ahead and share your thoughts in that chat function where it says everyone. Yes, lack of role models, lack of those in whom students can see themselves mirrored through each of the lenses we've talked about. Lack of self-confidence, yes, and some of our work, much of our work actually focuses, especially when we're using our micro-messaging cultural framework, which we'll be talking about in a future webinar, not so much today, but a key part of what we can do to help students in considering, trying out, pursuing, and persisting in these pathways is to build their self-efficacy, their belief in their ability to be successful. And so with that low self-efficacy, that can definitely discourage students from pursuing these programs. Lack of early exposure, yes. So lack of career information, making decisions based on a narrow lens of what's out there because students just haven't been exposed yet. When and where programs are conducted, yes. So that can affect in terms of access, transportation can be an issue, or even just awareness of where those programs are, how to access them, how to connect with them. Negative stigmas associated with these non-traditional occupations, yes, absolutely. In terms of people's beliefs about understanding of in many cases, stereotypes around particular occupations. Excellent. Thank you. Family or peer support and encouragement. Yes. And so family perceptions, sometimes it may be cultural in terms of expectations of individuals of a particular gender from in that community in terms of what's appropriate or what has been historically valued. And then peer support and encouragement or lack thereof. And the good thing is once we start to normalize participation in these occupations where especially women or men have been underrepresented, and we normalize that participation, then the peers themselves begin to reinforce that message as well because it's no longer unusual. It's no longer out of the ordinary. Good stuff. Thank you all so much. And so one of the resources you have available to you that you can download today is the third document that is referenced, but it's actually the first one in at least my list. It says 3, NAEP Root Causes. This is the Non-Traditional Career Preparation Root Causes and Strategies document, which is a summary, a distillation of what we know from the research are the key barriers to students' participation in programs that lead to non-traditional occupations, especially women's lack of participation in those programs that lead to non-traditional occupations in STEM, as I've just defined. And you can access this information by going to NAEP Equity, napequity.org/root, which is also referenced in the webinar handout from today. And then this document is a summary of the research, which falls into 5 categories. So it has to do with the educational environment, has to do with family perceptions, career information or lack thereof, as one has indicated, societal issues, which can include lack of role models and mentors, as well as peers' influence, and then ultimately the effect of each of those factors on the individual or at the internal level. And so I definitely recommend for everyone to reference and use this document because what you'll see is on the left-hand side is the theory or the statement, so it can be academic proficiency, access to and participation in STEM, for example, the curriculum, instructional strategies, classroom climate. But then on the right are the strategies that we know can mitigate those root causes, which we'll talk about how to use as we move further along. Before we jump straight into strategies, though, once we've got a good idea of what the root causes may be in that particular community, it's important then to check in with key stakeholders to see whether what you think is the key issue is indeed the key issue, and whether there are other factors that need to be considered as you move into strategy implementation. And so we do that through action research in the form of surveys, equity audits, which is looking at the institution or looking at the classroom, for example, and we'll hear about how that was used in the context of Roseburg High School very shortly, as well as interviews and focus groups, which we'll hear about momentarily in the context of work that was done at the College of Southern Nevada, all to validate and flesh out our understanding of those root causes. And so with that, I am delighted to introduce to you my colleague, Dianna Williams, CTE Senior Specialist and PIPE Co-Lead at the College of Southern Nevada, who has been engaged in this work since summer and who has had really exciting results from their innovative approach to action research in their PIPE work. So Dianna, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Ben, and I hope you all can hear me okay. Again, my name is Dianna Williams, and I am the CTE Senior Specialist and the NAEP Co-Lead here at the College of Southern Nevada, which you'll soon hear me refer to as CSN. So as Ben talked about, before we even got started, we wanted to identify the what is the causes of some of the issues, some of the barriers to students that the equity gaps and identify some of those issues before we get started on initiatives and planning. So we as a committee. So today what I'm going to talk about is we gathered a committee of administrators, faculty members, department chairs, counselors, advisors. So we're about 18 members strong right now. I still have faculty stopping me sometimes in the hallway saying, hey, I hear about the work that you're doing with NAEP, and I'd like to be a part of it. So just getting that conversation started with faculty has just been such a rewarding experience working with NAEP so far. So I just really wanted to put that out there. So today what I'm going to do is discuss, after we went through the data dashboard, we identified 3 majors that we wanted to initially target, which was CIT, HIT, and ET, which is computer information technology, health information technology, and engineering technology. And from that, we wanted, before we got started on any initiatives or, jumped into it, we wanted to send out a survey to all of our CSN students and to find out the what, and then to find out a little bit further of the how and the why they thought and express their concerns and issues and ideas about equity gaps in their particular majors. We conducted a student focus group / informational session, and we did the same with faculty. And those that couldn't attend, we did questionnaires. So let me just give you a little bit of demographic information about our institution. CSN is in Las Vegas, Nevada, and obviously an urban community, and our population is very diverse in ethnicity, culture, and socioeconomic. We have approximately 34,000 students, and of that population, about 60% are CTE majors. We have about 9,000 students that are full-time and 25,000 that are part-time. The far majority are first generation, and they work either part-time or full-time. So in the survey that we initiated, we sent it to all students, and we had about 1,560 students that responded. So we were really excited about the respondents to the survey. 31.83% males responded and 66.14% females responded. And I thought I'd just throw a little bit about the ethnic demographics back here in here. Let me get my little pointer on here so you can see the ethnic breakdown of those that participated. So because we asked them about 20 questions to really dig into, to get their feedback and their thoughts on why they chose that major, or what the barriers were, or some of their expectations were, their career aspirations for choosing one of those CTE majors. So I just to give you some insight, I just decided to choose a few of the questions in the response percentages that we had from the survey. So one of the questions is, who helped you select your major? And as you can see, I thought this was really interesting and very telling that we had 30.4% that said, hey, my friends and peers were the ones that helped me select, as opposed to 9.4% high school counselors and teachers. So that was very telling. And once again, Ben mentioned, before you want to jump into strategizing, implementing new initiatives to help reduce the equity gaps, you really need to have a better perspective from the students where their thought processes are on how they selected their majors and the reasons they selected their majors. So here we have, because we are a community college, you would have thought that we have over 75% of our majors have certificates, but only 5% said that they wanted to pursue certificates, as opposed to 53.21 wanted an associate's degree, and the far majority wanted, we weren't surprised at, wanted to transfer to a 4-year institution to pursue their bachelor's degree. So here are some other things that I thought was very interesting to share. And I'm going to turn this off. Did they feel academically prepared to complete their degree that they selected their STEM or CTE major? 93% said yes. They felt very strongly that they felt prepared. High salaries that are associated with selecting their majors, was that a key factor? 76% said that that was very much a driving factor, the reason why they selected their major. Confident that they had the skills, the prior skills such as math and science to be successful. 97% said that they strongly agreed. People of my ethnicity are successful in this career. This is very telling because once again we're talking about identifying equity gaps, and so we wanted to get their perspective. 87% said that they strongly agree that they could identify with someone from their ethnic background being successful. Confident that a man or woman can be successful in this career. 70% said that they agreed. Only 1% disagreed. And here, have they taken previous STEM-related courses and enjoyed them? 61% said that they agreed or strongly agreed. So, from the survey, obviously we wanted to have some more intrusive information from these students. So we sent out invitations to all the students that participated in the survey, but specifically we targeted the CIT, HIT, and ET majors. And we had a student, 2 sessions of a student focus group and informational sessions, and we had about 10 students that participated in both sessions. Well, actually about 7 in our last session. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that came out of this, and this was very much an informational session, and what I mean by that, students were able to be very transparent and share their thoughts, and so we learned a lot more than just the information that we learned from the questions on the Likert scale that we sent out from the survey. So factors that allowed them to make their major selection. They said that they had prior knowledge. Or it worked with their schedule, or they identified this particular field as a growing field. Some of the biggest barriers that they were currently experiencing in their program: time management, work-life balance, and many of them surprisingly said that there were no tutors for the courses that they were taking, and specifically had some students that said, you know, I'm in CIT, these courses are really rigorous, and we need to have tutors that can specifically help us, and so that is one of the barriers that I think that a lot of my classmates are not going on and persisting, or you know, we're not being retained because we don't have assistance. So that was very telling for us. Also, job awareness of job opportunities. We wanted to know, were you aware of job opportunities? Was that one of the factors that that made you initiate to want to participate in that particular major or select that major? Many of them said yes, it's a growing field. Some said, I'm not aware of any opportunities. And then we also had others that said there are potential job openings. I'm really aware. I stay in connection with our job bank here at CSN and other national job banks, so I'm aware of the job opportunities. Suggestions on how we can promote STEM at CSN. This was really a fun question that we asked in the focus group. If you were the president of CSN, what would you do differently to help students to be aware of STEM opportunities? Because obviously some of the things that came out is that, you know, we didn't know what HIT was until we came here. We weren't aware of the opportunities that, you know, as a woman that I could have in electrical engineering technology. So some of them said, we're currently in the process of updating and getting a new website. So they said, we really want to make sure that our CSN website is user-friendly, specifically for potential students, prospective students that are interested. Have something out there that tells a little bit more about the programs and connects them and maybe have some student testimonials. So that was very helpful for us to know. Career fairs. This was very interesting because we have career fairs all the time. We have career opportunities where they can have interviewing skills enhanced and enhance their resumes. And our career director just happens to be on our CS and NAEP committee, and he was sitting in, and he said, I send out emails all the time. And they said, we don't get those emails. Or because we're inundated with so many emails, we kind of overlook that. Is there a way that we can streamline that information? You can get that to us so that we can really participate. So that was very helpful for us because another instructor that just happened to be there said, I use internal listservs to get information to my students that are specifically in my classes. So when you have a career fair, get it over to me and I can share that with them. And we know that they're going to absolutely see that email and respond. Scholarship incentives. They wanted to see more scholarships in their particular majors. Finances is one of the barriers, as we know, that students we don't see them retained or persisting in CTE or STEM majors. Some of the open-ended responses I just wanted to share. They wanted to see more classes offered at night. Finances was a issue that was repetitively mentioned in the focus group. Language barriers. We have a lot of Hispanic student population is very high here at CSN, and they have language that was a barrier. They wanted to see their instructors be a little bit more technically savvy, so I tried to word that in the best way that I could that was diplomatic. And they wanted to see the students, their instructors, more interactive with them, so that was one of the things that they mentioned. Time management, to work around their classes. Transportation was an issue. Access to counselors. We have a high student-to-counselor ratio here. They wanted to be able to get in to talk to them more about some of their issues and some of their aspirations as far as internships. We have excess credit fee that was being definitely mentioned over and over again in some of our sessions. That was a financial barrier. Prerequisites not offered or made not clear to them. Some of the requirements that are constantly changing in their mind that they need to be notified of. So we need to do a better job as an institution communicating those degree and requirement changes. They wanted to see more of their particular gender in their program. We had one student that said, hey, I'm a CIT, and I am the only female student. I'm the only white female student in that particular major. And it can be a bit, bit intimidating when you walk into it. So, yes, and it was really nice because after the focus group, I had students email me and say, this was such an awesome opportunity. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to participate. I still want to be able to participate in future opportunities because I think this has value. So, and they were sharing some other ideas with me that they want to see that maybe will help to recruit more of their particular gender or their ethnic gender and race into that particular field. So along with the student focus group, we had a faculty questionnaire focus group, and I'm still in the process of evaluating and getting all of that data together, but I did want to share some of the high points from some of the open-ended information that was shared during that focus group. So we had about 9 faculty that came to the focus group informational session, and we have about 20 questionnaires that are still coming in. And the nice thing about the questionnaires, those that could not be there, we also sent questionnaires to our school district, which is the Clark County School District. Some of the faculty wanted to participate, so we'll have about 20 to 25 of those faculty that will share their information. But just for the sake of time, I just wanted to share some of the things that they said that they would like to see that maybe potential solutions to, initially identify and help identify areas that we can close those equity gaps. So one of the things that they said that we need to, as an institution, make the community more aware about our program offerings, especially we have 3 campuses at our North Las Vegas campus. where our engineering technology and our computer information technology programs are housed. And because the community is not, in their opinion, aware of all of the different wonderful program offerings that we have, so that they're not able to share that with potential incoming students. Also, to address local community potential student apprehensions to pursue higher education opportunities. They seem to have comfort level with where they are and where they're at in their life. So we thought, some of the faculty said, we need to do more outreach with our Clark County School District in terms of maybe collaborating. We do participate in some of their career fairs, but just to have more individual, maybe that CIT department and that department chair or faculty could go out specifically and talk to some of the juniors and seniors about what we do here in those particular majors. Exposure is powerful. We know that's key. We want to make sure that they said the counselors and advisors are trained on not just the curriculum, but actually what the expectations are when they go into the career industry. Some of the counselors are relatively new here at CSN, and even they were saying the counselors in the Clark County School District. So from this discussion, it was really awesome. Some of our faculty said, hey, we want to be able to go into the school district and talk about some of those things that we're doing. And they want to also to be able to see more data to help inform their decisions and to improve their courses. So those were some of the things that they came out of the focus group faculty information session. So thank you, and then I am going to introduce now my colleague Cheri Carson, who is from Roseburg, Oregon, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about the action plans and some of the things that they're doing currently at her institution. And so, Cheri, if you want to come on, I want to welcome you.
Thank you, Dianna. My name is Cheri Carson from Roseburg High School, and this shows you a little bit about where we are here in Douglas County. There are 12 high schools in our area, 1 community college, and amongst those we have 8 programs of study. And we're kind of unique because Roseburg High School is a direct recipient of Perkins funding, and then our ESD covers the other 11 high schools and our reserve grant that we share with them. And then Umpqua Community College has their own grant that now has been merged with the ESD. So our original team consisted of 3 of us, Annalisa Nicholson from the Douglas ESD, Christy Hurt from Umpqua Community College, and then myself. And our programs of study you can see on the slide for non-traditional female and non-traditional male. And we chose as the group to do welding because UCC has a welding program, Roseburg had a welding program, and many of the other high schools that Annalisa covers also had welding programs, and the numbers for welding were all low, and so we thought that would be the best one to work with.
Cheri, this is Freda Walker, and we cannot see you, but have you turned on the sharing, your webcam? And if so, we know that we just don't have a picture, and it's okay.
I have, and we just don't have a picture. Sorry.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And so with that, we chose the welding. Since I am the division leader for our career technical department and handle the funds, we focused on the Roseburg High School model. And with that, my group got together and came up with some things as to why females may not want to do welding. And so you can see there the climate, the characteristics of a career, models, and mentors all came up over and over again. And so what could we do to try to fix that? So with that, here at Roseburg on Wednesdays, we have an hour shorter schedule so that the department can work together and come up with professional development opportunities. And this is a big enough problem for us that we decided to devote a lot of that time to how we could raise these non-traditional numbers. So with that, we did a staff survey of our department to kind of sit back and see how we could change what we're doing to be more inviting to students. Because one of the things that kept coming up over and over again through different things in our survey was uninviting body language for students, calling on students whose gender the instructor didn't identify with on a regular basis, and discussions showed differences based on gender. So if the instructor asked a question and called on a female student and the female student gave the answer, but it wasn't in the terms that the instructor was looking for, they still sometimes got overlooked and still went to the male student who gave what the instructor felt was more of the correct answer. So through that, and through our PD sessions on Wednesdays, we worked really hard at focusing on changing those items. And then we also did a student survey. And so here at Roseburg, we had 1,286 surveys returned. And the results showed that parent influence was a big reason why students didn't get involved in these types of classes. Their schedule wasn't accommodating to it. Comments from friends, counselors when they went to schedule for their classes. Sometimes if a female said they wanted to take a non-traditional course, it was kind of discouraged from that point. Safety equipment, so the gloves were too big. They didn't want to dress down into the coveralls. The welding hoods they didn't like. And then other students and how they felt about it. So in going through all of those types of things and focusing on welding, we decided, well, what types of things can we do right now to try to work on this? So the welding instructor was great about working really hard, changing how he communicated with the female student, how he used some of his female students who actually were good welders to help demonstrate to others, how we could change the equipment that they are having to use. And so with that, we spent, since we only had 4 students, we spent $350, and we bought some smaller gloves, which not only worked for the females, but for the smaller males who some of the gloves were too big for also. We got some welding jackets that are adjustable so that they were a little more stylish, and then some newer welding hoods. And every time I mention this, people automatically think that, well, you went out and bought pink welding hoods or something like that. We just changed what type of welding hood we got and the design on it. So we have ones that have the American flag on them. We have ones that have flames on them. We have some that have dark purple wings on them. And then we have the original ones still that are just kind of the black color with no designs or anything. And the females, of course, we gave them the newer hoods and that to use, but we had bought a few extra that some of the boys were wearing too because they were a little smaller and fit some of them better. We also have a course for all of our freshmen called Freshman House. So it's like getting an orientation to high school study habits. We have different curriculum that are things to help them survive high school, and it's only for the semester. So as part of that, we implemented a freshman cruise into that freshman house class. So for a week, each freshman class of freshman house, 5 to 7 students from that class comes to one of our CTE courses every period. So for that week, every CTE teacher gets an extra 5 to 7 students so that all of those freshman students get exposed to the CTE classes. And we kind of intentionally hooked up the female welding students with the females that were in the freshman cruise to get them comfortable in working in the area, and that they didn't feel intimidated by the male students. We also do Pride Night, which is like an open house, so that our incoming freshmen, our current students, and community members are all invited to come in. We do some hands-on activity, and we set that up a lot like the freshman cruise piece, where we targeted specifically students, got them into their hands-on type stuff. And then we explored the non-traditional careers, had some non-traditional mentors come in and talk about the industry. So as I mentioned earlier, we started in the fall of 2015 with 4 females in the welding class. That second semester, we had increased to 38 females in that welding class, which of course I had to buy some more of the equipment. But with that type of increase, obviously what we were doing was working, and so we wanted to try to keep building on that. And I wanted to see, was this just a one-time deal, or were we going to maintain and possibly increase the number of students who went into welding? And what we found is that when we started this fall, we had 38 females in the welding program. And this spring, so spring 2017, we still have about 37 females. One student moved away, so we lost that one. But I just last week got the numbers for the upcoming school year, and it looks like we have 42 currently signed up for the fall for the welding class, so that's an increase again. We also, because we've been successful in several of the things that we have been trying to do with the freshman cruise, the middle schools got together and they wanted us to do an 8th grade cruise before those 8th grade students come in and register with their counselors and before Pride Night. So we set that up by sending 2 CTE students from each of our areas to the middle school to meet with the 8th graders. So we set it up kind of as there's just a table for each CTE program, and then the middle school staff rotated 8th graders from table to table. And then, of course, they could come to Pride Night, which was the next thing, and then register for classes. Currently, we are working on our early childhood education program, because consistently we had 1 or 2 male students in the early childhood education program. And we wanted to see, is what we're trying to do helping? And the numbers that I received last week for that is that there are currently 6 male students signed up for the early childhood education program for this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheri. It's so exciting to hear the results of the work that you've been doing at Roseburg High School and the insights that have come from the action research at the College of Southern Nevada that Dianna shared with us as well. I think it's a wonderful indication of the power of the PIPE process through action research to really understand the dynamics that might be creating those barriers to students' access into these programs. But as we've seen, when we really are intentional about addressing those key barriers after having identified and validated that through the action research, you can see the kind of results that come out of that. What I love about the example from Roseburg High School is you had the action research bear out concerns about the instructional or the environment, the educational environment, and especially the fact that all the equipment was size large. So a key strategy was purchasing new equipment that would be multiple sizes, but then it not stopping there, having the welding instructors buy in, implementing the freshman crews in order to expose students to career pathways and expose everybody to each of the CTE programs, putting the 4 girls front and center to be able to model for other students, but especially mentor other girls and encourage their participation in the welding program. The Pride Night to open up the community's access to, understanding of, and support of the welding program, and in particular girls' participation in those programs, seeing those 4 girls front and center. And then the last piece was also doing some work with educators using our Explore Non-Traditional Careers Toolkit to help the teachers, the counselors, and those working with students to understand the ways that implicit bias can also create barriers to students' access to programs because of assumptions that people may not make or may not realize they're making. And so helping to uncover and pull apart those dynamics so to help those educators to really be intentional about affirming students and pursuing these pathways. In the example of what's been happening at CSN with understanding how students are taking in all this information, who are the key people helping them to make decisions about career pathways, can really help to inform then strategies that will help to narrow in on those areas that can really help to open up access. And so in PIPE, following the process of discovering the root cause work, doing the action research, then we come to select, which is then identifying those strategies that we know through evidence and research has been effective in mitigating those root causes in the past. And so what we use to do that is both the chart I was referencing before, as well as information that's available through the NAEP website. As you can see, it's referenced here, napequity.org/root, from which you can then access information about each of the root causes, recommendations and strategies, and then links to examples of those who've had success in doing that work. And so we're going to hear from another colleague as to how those strategies have helped to bridge some of the supports between middle school and high school relative to CTE and non-traditional occupational pathways. And we know this is a key part of providing supports for students as they move through the process. And you'll see also how the strategies really help to address the root causes that their PIPE project identified. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mary Jo Wilhelm, who is the Community Relations Coordinator at Vantage Career Center in Van Wert, Ohio. Mary Jo, take it away.
Thank you, Ben. I will. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Jo Wilhelm at Vantage Career Center in rural Northwest Ohio. Our school is a career center with 17 different career technical education programs. We have 13 feeder schools who feed into us. We have about 450 juniors and seniors here at our school. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about recruiting and early exposure to some non-traditional programming for students. We have a program called Step Into Your Future for 7th and 8th grade girls. And it is a totally different way to spend a Saturday morning in January when there's lots of snow on the ground and it's freezing here. It's a great hands-on adventure for these young ladies. They spend about 45 minutes rotating through 4 different labs. As you can see here, carpentry, welding, ag and industrial power technology. They were also doing some virtual reality in the network systems lab. They are able to take home those awesome neon pink t-shirts that they get, welding caps, carpenter's aprons that were donated, safety glasses, any little projects that they actually did in the lab. You can see on that upper left-hand picture they are actually making a step stool, and they get to take that home. In the welding class this year, they welded together pieces to make a metal flower. And this is all free to the students. We provide it, it's paid out of my community relations budget as a recruiting tool for these students. Is it working? I think it is working. We have had Step Into Your Future for over 15 years, and when we went back and accumulated the data, we realized that nearly 30% of the girls who attended Step Into Your Future when they were in the 7th or 8th grade actually enrolled at Vantage for their junior and senior years of high school. Why? I guess they found out that they liked working with their hands. It was interesting. They found out they were good at it. It was fun. We also had current female students as role models working right alongside the students in the labs and helping them out. We had some female staff members who are also very talented and are able to do that. They became familiar with the building and the staff, and it was just a fun experience for them. It was a very successful career exploration activity for them. So when they come over as a junior to enroll, and now obviously not all of them enrolled in non-traditional programs. So we wanted those who did enroll in the non-traditional programs to have a way to stay connected to each other. One of our hypotheses was also that role models and mentors would help females to persist and complete those STEM pathway programs. As you can see, in 2011, we only had 4% of females in non-traditional STEM pathway programs. In 2015, it jumped up to 10, and now it's currently at 11. We actually started our non-traditional Lunch and Learn in mid-year of fiscal year 13. So our goal was to increase the participation, retention, and completion of the non-traditional students at Vantage by 10%. Did I mention we are a rural school in Northwest Ohio? Our county is only 30,000 people, the entire county. Our 13 feeder schools are very small and they're far away. Some students travel as far as 40 miles one way just to come to us to school. So we needed to find a way to incorporate our plan and our strategy into the school day, which was already packed, no study halls, career tech programs, and then the graduation requirements next. So we too have on Wednesdays an advantage period, a 30-minute period where students can get extra help. Maybe we can have some meetings. So we selected that time for our quarterly Lunch and Learn non-traditional meetings. It overlapped the lunch period, so we were going to have to be able to provide lunch, so we were able to do that. We always invited the superintendent, staff members, CTE teachers who had students, female students in their program, and our PIPE STEM committee members. And I really want to take a second to let you know we had an amazing group of ladies. We had representatives from the American Association of University Women, the Girl Scouts, the YWCA, some non-traditional alumni, female engineers from Eaton Corporation, adult education representatives, as well as community college representatives from a partner community college that is nearby. And I just wanted you to see when I actually reached out to these women to come and speak for 20 minutes basically to our high school students. We got support from the National Association of Women in Construction, the Ohio Department of Transportation, Eaton Corporation, Motoman. We had phenomenal representation from General Motors in Defiance, a maintenance coordinator who was great, a miner and a quality control inspector from Stoneco, even a representative from Chicago Women in Trades who is based in Cleveland. Cleveland is 3 hours from here, so she got up very early in the morning to come and talk to our students and take a tour to find out more about what it is that we do here. Did we meet our goal? Well, almost. We increased the participation and retention of our non-traditional students by 7%. We went all the way from 9 students in 2011 to 28 students this year. But more importantly, we provided role models and mentors in a variety of careers that were underrepresented by females and that we have CTE programs for. Our students had the opportunity to meet many successful, extraordinary women in family-sustaining careers who were very encouraging and supportive, who cared enough to be involved. These women across the board absolutely gave our students their cell phone numbers, their email addresses, offers for job shadows, anything that would be able to help them in this microcosm of networking that we were able to create. And we have our preliminary numbers for next year. We have 18 new incoming junior females in non-traditional programs, plus we have 11 who are returning seniors in those programs. So slowly, inch by inch, we are increasing those numbers, and we will be at 29 next year, and we're very excited about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Jo. It's just really exciting to see the work that you all have been doing, the progress that you've made. And I think for everyone on today's webinar, you'll see that if you look at the non-traditional career preparation root causes and strategies chart that I was referencing before, you'll see the importance of student support services, which is under the education category, the importance of, within societal issues, the importance of collaboration across the pipeline and with community partners and business and industry partners, and the importance of providing role models and mentors, which Mary Jo talked about. And so you can see how the strategies that have been implemented at Vantage over the last 6 years have really been addressing those 3 key areas, and through that process building student self-efficacy both at the middle school level, the early high school level, and then once students are in the career technical programs, in these occupational pathways where they find a fabulous fit for themselves and important supports from those who are successful in the career with whom they can identify and see themselves mirrored. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And so as we move through PIPE and we identify those strategies, then it's critical to implement those in ways where we can measure whether what we're doing is having the desired effect. And so you heard in each of the illustrations that we've been so fortunate to hear about today how evaluation and assessment has been built in throughout, including in Mary Jo's sharing with us the progress that has been made in increasing both the participation, persistence, and completion of girls in these secondary programs and then their transition into those post-secondary pathways down the way as women. So one of the key pieces in PIPE as well is there's a real opportunity through the PIPE plan, which is how this process is captured to become then a tool that an institution or a district or a state can use moving forward, both in the context of Perkins and in the context of other program improvement, and then how that can be used and leveraged with other activities that might be happening in the district to help to broaden commitment to access and equity in education and careers. And so I'm delighted to share with you, or to introduce to you, my colleague Ken Morris Jr., who's the manager of student equity in Cedar Rapids Community School District in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who has been working with the leadership team on their PIPE implementation and how to integrate a really exciting approach to building educators' capacity to implement effective solutions that increase student access and equity. And so with that, I'm going to pass the baton to you, Ken. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me. Also, I want to just give props to all the presenters that went before me. I don't feel that the work that I'm doing is quite to the level, is not as developed, but I'm honored for the invitation to share some of the work that I've helped to lead, knowing that it can only get better, and certainly there's evidence from some of the sharings from my colleagues that shared with you before. As Ben mentioned, my name is Ken Morris Jr., the manager of student equity at Cedar Rapids Community School District, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We are a suburban school district, and as you probably would imagine, Iowa is a homogenous state. While we don't have a lot of representation in terms of students, people of color, we do have a growing population of students of color in our school district, around 28%. Unfortunately, though, our staff population doesn't reflect that, being close to 5%. Ergo, the work that we do in equity is so critical and so important. We do the work of equity because inequities exist. And so that's going to be the thing that I'm going to speak about throughout my time here with you today, and just share some of the work that we are engaging in with the PIPE process and NAEP. So our journey, or our story, begins back January 2016, last year. The Department of Education did an equity site visit. And what they found was that the district, while we did a really great job of having some really developed CTE courses, there was disproportionate enrollment in those CTE courses by race, gender, and disability. So my colleague, Cheri Carson, who is the facilitator of the CTE curriculum in Gear Up, I want to give a big shout out for her for bringing me, including me and others into this work and leading the work. Got a staff, central office folks, counselors, teachers, all the people who had entry points into CTE to go attend a NAEP workshop that we were honored that Dr. Ben Williams and a colleague was leading. And in the workshop, some of the things that were at least the biggest takeaways for me in the PIPE process were two modules. In particular, it was the root cause analysis, which you got a glimpse of earlier, and the micro-messaging module. The micro-messaging module was particularly of note because I was thinking about our system and how students of color, women, students who are differently abled may receive messages that they might not be smart enough to go into Intro to Engineering Design or CTE courses. And those messages may not be intentional, but those messages may not be inclusive enough to reach students and where they're at. And so and then as I think about the other module, the root cause analysis, one thing that was really powerful about that experience was as we were identifying some of the root causes, there was hesitancy in the group to address the impact of the social political construction and social political reality that's race, that fuels implicit bias and disproportionality. And so once we were able to be comfortable with the uncomfortable and have that conversation, we started to see how the work that Nick was doing, particularly with this PIPE process, could really help us to think creatively and be strategic about setting targets and measures for having more underrepresented students in CTE courses and non-traditional career courses or what have you. So part of that workshop, we were charged with taking away some action steps. So I think Tara and the rest of us, it was in the consensus that we wanted to pursue a more formal working relationship with NAEP to help bring some of those training modules to our high schools and to our middle schools, and I think it was a natural connection to even partner with our local community college. Another thing that was really glaring for me was that there wasn't a central hub necessarily for systemic equity work in our school district. So I thought that it would be a good idea to create a senior level equity leadership team that part of its charge could help to oversee and bring equity work as it has touch points in every area of our system to incorporate that into some of the work of this particular group so that there was a central charge versus isolated, siloed efforts throughout the system. So I was very pleased that both of those were successful in terms of living out those actions. Simultaneously, as we were engaging in this NAEP and pipe work, the superintendent had, contacted me and wanted to know if there was a measurement tool that could measure cultural competence. And so with my work and background in higher education, I was familiar with a measurement tool called the IDI, or the Intercultural Development Inventory. It's a cross-culturally validated and reliable measure of individual and group intercultural competence. Often, I think about in doing the work of equity, we tend to sometimes prescribe solutions or activities to individuals without really first endeavoring to do our own work. So I think about if you're familiar with riding on an airplane, and as the flight attendant will go over the emergency safety protocol, they would, when they get to the part about the oxygen mask, they would say, put your mask on yourself first before you help a child or another individual. And so I always think about that and relate it to the work of equity training and how I think we sometimes miss opportunities to really go deep in doing our own self-work and then being able to connect that to systems work. So using the IDI, it's become a mechanism on where to grow and help identify possible blind spots, avoiding shame, blame, and guilt, and having deep conversations about the conditions that exist that create the equity gaps and opportunity gaps and some of the bias that we see and why there's disproportionalities and especially in CTE courses or what have you and beyond. So where we are, advance the slide here. I went and became a licensed qualified administrator at IDI because it was important for me to build capacity within the school district. I didn't want it to be, one initiative and, this too shall pass sort of thing. I wanted this to be something that I could help lead, but also get others involved with being able to assess and provide interpretation and then also provide IDI guided development to help individuals grow in their own cultural awareness. It seemed logical to me that both processes, PIPE and the work of IDI, in my mind, were both processes that were deep in equity with outcomes that require equality or what have you. And so with that, I wanted to innovate the PIPE work and talk to Ben and got his permission and blessing, and he thought that it was logical too that the IDI would be a value add to PIPE and because the IDI is an overlay for equity work, for all equity work, and didn't think that it would be conflicting with each other. So I was pleased because it made sense in my mind, but I got that validation that it also made sense to him that this could be, an additional measurement to be able to see where we're at individually and perhaps unpack why we've seen some of the discrepancies and disproportionalities we're experiencing in our work and in the school district. As I mentioned earlier, if you think about the stages of implementation science, we are definitely in the exploratory phase. We don't necessarily have any data or work just yet to suggest or to tell our story in terms of the impact that it's making. We're still in the intro stage, which I think is good because we are also still in the introduction stage with incorporating pipe and NAEP and the pipe work into our system here. One of our high schools that I think about, as you heard some of the shared knowledge, and I think about how shared knowledge could be shared success. And one of our high schools connected with, I believe, Cheri in particular about the freshman cruise. And that was something that was implemented here with much success at one of our high schools that has been a part of the NAEP leadership group. And so that's something that they're going to continue to develop and share out their results so that it could be replicated at other high schools within the district. Let me see here. So what's next for us? So right now we have 3 schools that one on every level that we've targeted to be an IDI pilot school that we would do a year-long dive with IDI guided development for all staff. Some of those staff members, particularly at the high school, are also a part of the NAEP leadership teams within their buildings. And so with that, I've also, as I talked about earlier, building internal capacity. I arranged for 21 staff members within the district to also be trained as QAs at IDI, and some of those staff members are also involved with the NAEP work. And so that's exciting that they now have the vision for using both processes to help in creating pathways for students that may have been overlooked. And so I'm excited about that process becoming more fully developed in the coming year. We've also identified some leadership groups within the district. To me, it's just imperative that leaders lead the work. And so we thought logically our administrators, principals, some of our instructional design specialists, some of our OLL teacher leaders would be some, groups that who are in front of and doing professional learning already and providing coaching, and we thought that it would make sense for them to also be exposed to the IDI and NAEP work as it applies in their system. So in closing, what I want to really stress is that we have to move away from creating the illusion of moving toward equity, and we do that by deconstructing systems of inequity and reconstructing systems of justice in education. So with that, I'll close and turn it back over to Ben.
Dynamite. Thank you so much, Ken. So what's exciting about what Ken shared with us and what we learned about with the IDI and the work that's been happening in Cedar Rapids is how both the use, implementation, integration of the intercultural development inventory and an understanding both at the individual level and the team level of how to become more culturally competent could be used and leveraged with PIPE, but it also has become a key strategy within the implementation framework for that project to move forward with their work. And so what's exciting is they're going to be IDI-trained individuals at each of the schools who are part of the district work. They'll be providing that support at the local level and then getting additional support from the district. And so I think it really, we've heard from each of our colleagues how this process really helps to bring together individuals across an institution or across a district to be very systematic, to collaborate, to look across systems, and to then be able to identify and address those gaps, those opportunity gaps, and those equity gaps in the participation, performance, and completion of students in programs, especially those leading into non-traditional occupations, but in those programs that lead to high-skill, high-wage, high-demand careers. And this then becomes an iterative process that individuals can use to continue the process. So, for example, Mary Jo, who we heard from a little while ago, did the formal training with me back in 2011, 2012, and you can see 5 years later the fruits of their labor and the work that they've been able to continue by really integrating this into their systems. And so we'd like, one last thing before I open it up and invite my colleagues back to join us and we can have more of a conversation with our participants. I want to let you all know about one of the downloadable documents that's available today. This is an article I wrote for ACTE Techniques magazine last year, introducing the PIPE process and then talking about the exciting outcomes that have come out of the work at Roseburg High School, which we heard about from Cheri today. But this is a great way to describe to others how PIPE works. It's just a couple pages long, and I hope it's a useful tool to you. You can also find more information about this on our website by going to napequity.org/program improvement process for equity. And so with that, I'd like to introduce all my colleagues back, or invite my colleagues back into the room. And what we'd like to do is, well, first, I want to thank everyone for a really exciting discussion and sharing opportunity to share with peers throughout the country. So I'm going to give you all a virtual round of applause and then invite our participants to ask any questions they might have. And then Freda would love for you to facilitate us working through some of those questions as we move forward. I also want to recognize that we're right at about 90 minutes into our webinar, so if people need to leave, by all means, we understand. But if you can stay on for a little bit longer, we'd love to have the opportunity for some questions and answers. And this will also be recorded, and people can come back and view it at a later date. But I hope everyone can stay with us. So, Fred, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. The first question we have is for Dianna, and it had to do with, you actually answered it, but I didn't know if you wanted to come back to that. You gave your email address and talked about the survey. So do you have anything else you want to add? They asked if all students were surveyed, and was the survey developed by your institute, or was it some standard NAEP survey? Dianna, you're not, I can't hear you. Can you turn on your audio, please? Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was still on mute. Okay, so yes, regarding the survey, the committee got together and we developed a subcommittee, and we came up with all of the questions that we wanted to ask in that survey. We also have a survey administrator in our IR department that suggested that we added a few extra questions, so we collaborated on that. But yeah, the survey was very, very specific and direct so that we could target those students to get a better understanding for their experience with CTE and STEM programs here at CSN. Also, I put my email address up if anyone would like the information from the survey, the results, as well as from the student and questionnaire and faculty, student questionnaire and focus group and informational session. I'm still in the process of putting all the information together for the faculty focus group, but I do have that information, as well as my PowerPoint. If you want that, I can send that as well. One of the things that I didn't mention is some of the things that Mary Jo shared is things that we're doing based on the information that we learned from that questionnaire and focus group. We had a summit seminar where over 100 of our faculty members came because they want to learn more about data. We also had a Science and Technology Expo where 2,000 of our middle school and high school girls came and experienced some of the similar things that Mary Jo was talking about that they're doing at their institution. So thank you so much to Ben and the efforts that you have made to help us to get this conversation and this ball rolling at CSN.
Okay, our second question has, Ben, I'm going to let you answer it. I know that you've just put up an answer in the chat, but it has to do with the micro-messaging that Ken mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. So I chose not to get very much into our micro-messaging to reach and teach every student curriculum in the context of today's webinar. But it is a very exciting approach and cultural framework that can be used to do the kind of work that Ken's been talking about. And in fact, we'll be talking about that in the context of our next couple of webinars, which I'll talk about at the end. But we have our new Ensuring Equity and Problem-Based Learning Toolkit and Inspiring Courage to Excel Through Self-Efficacy, which are grounded in that micro-messaging cultural framework. And you can see more information at the URL that I've referenced above, and also in the NAEP Services Overview handout that is downloadable from today's webinar.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Do presenters have any other comments they would like to make before we do the takeaways? No? Okay, let's move on then. Ben?
Okay, great. Well, so in thinking about the work that's been shared today. Oh, and thank you. Dr. Megan Pollack, our Director of Professional Development, is participating in our webinar today and has just shared with us some additional information and a URL that we can link to. And Megan will also be hosting our upcoming webinars May 26th, which is this Friday, and May 31st, which is next week. I'll look at my calendar before we reference that at the end. And Megan has recommended clicking on that professional development link first. Wednesday. Thank you, Megan. So Wednesday, July 31st, and Friday, May 26th. So key takeaways that I think are important for us to think about as we depart today's conversation, but I hope continue the conversation in our respective states and institutions and districts and regions throughout the country, is that PIPE really provides a systematic program improvement process where we use data to drive performance improvement with access and equity at the center. And so what happens then is if we're mindful of and intentional about addressing those key gaps through the lens of gender, race and ethnicity, and special populations, and the intersection of those lenses in both the participation, persistence, and completion and access for students to these program pathways, that's a critical starting point. And then reflecting on and repeating that process helps to broaden impact, as we've heard about from those who are farther along in the process, such as Mary Jo, for example, and the work at Vantage Career Center, which has been underway now for, 6 years, which is really exciting. As you can see, utilizing a diverse teams of educators, staff, and partners broadens commitment and I think gives the opportunity to connect with other initiatives so that this is not something that's just an add-on, but it's a value add, as Ken shared with us. It's an opportunity to leverage and provide a framework for guiding that work. And also when you have a diverse team and a team that represents many different interests within that institution or that region, it also helps to distribute the work. As everyone can attest, those of you who've been on the call today who've been leading the discussion, each of them is a hard worker, a leader, someone who has brought so much to the table, but it's a very heavy lift if you're doing it by yourself. And so it's really important to have a team to support that work, and the impact can be even greater. Data collection over time helps to show trend. Disaggregating those data, as I said, is key. And it also helps, I think, in prioritizing action steps and resource allocation. So right now, for those of us who are in the world of Carl D. Perkins and grant administration, we're right at the end of this fiscal year, FY 2017. Everybody's wrapping up that grant cycle and gearing up for FY 18. So it helps in saying, okay, where do we need to put our energies, our resources, our focus, what kinds of actions do we want to take, and how will that help us in reaching those specific objectives we have at our institution. And then, as you heard, the root cause analysis through the action research is such a critical piece of the puzzle, as Dianna shared with us, and I was very fortunate to be able to be a fly on the wall for one of the focus groups back in March. It's been really a rich, rich opportunity to hear from students what their experiences are, how they interpret the information that is sent to them, and how they are able to access the resources at the institution, and the clear fact that oftentimes, especially our adult students, are overwhelmed by all that's coming at them. And so how do we help them to manage that in ways that can help them to truly access the resources that we have available? And what's exciting is that CSN, for example, you've got this team of folks from student services, academic services, collaborating in using this information. Cheri shared with us the work that's been done at Roseburg and how those surveys really helped to inform how they approached their strategies, in particular the insights that came out of their equity audit, realizing, oh my gosh, all of our welding equipment is size large. That could be problematic for smaller people. Okay, boom, important starting point, but not stopping there and really leveraging that. And then implementing research and evidence-based strategy truly provides solutions and increases performance results. And I think doing that in a way that also builds educators' self-efficacy around doing this work, which is complex and critical, as Ken shared with us, is such an important piece of the puzzle. And so what PIPE does is it provides a mechanism that, as you've heard, the work can then be applied at the local level to address those key areas of concern around the participation and completion of students in non-traditional occupations, especially those that lead to high-skill, high-wage, high-demand careers. So I want to thank again our co-presenters today. It's been fabulous to hear from them and for them to share with us their insights, especially at this super busy time of the year. And it's been a delight to work with each of them and their project teams, and excited to see that work continue moving forward. And I invite all of our participants today, if you have not already, to participate in our virtual learning community, which you can link to directly through our website by clicking on Participate in the Pipeline Press. And I encourage you also to attend our National Summit for Educational Equity, which is our national conference. We just had it a couple weeks ago. It's scheduled for next year, April 16th through 19th in Arlington, Virginia, where it will be a great gathering of folks sharing effective practices, making connections, networking, and I think just sharing exciting work that's happening focused on increasing student access, educational equity, and workforce diversity at a time when each of us can really learn from one another as to what are most effective practices. And I encourage you also to take a look at the resources that are available on our website. And I want to share with you a unique opportunity you all have. You may have received information from us through our listserv that right now there's a 10% discount in our online store if you use the code SUMMER2017. So I encourage you to do that if you've got resources left and would be interested in purchasing some of these toolkits, which are designed for individuals or teams of individuals to reflect on the impact implicit bias can have on students, and then how to use what we know from the research to build student self-efficacy in first checking out and then pursuing these occupational pathways that we know lead to exciting and important and high-demand jobs. And as I shared before, there are also infographics that are available, and we will be having a webinar in May that I'll put up here in just a minute. But before I do, I want to share with you one of my favorite quotes, and I think this is so indicative of what's been shared today, and that is, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And so each of us, I think, has a critical role to play, and when we're connecting with others and really looking for opportunities to collaborate and opportunities for synergy, as you can see, the results can be extremely exciting, and the positive impact that can happen for students and for the educators who serve for them is something that can both be measured and I think is in many cases also immeasurable and invaluable. And so I encourage you all to participate in our upcoming webinars that we will have this Friday on ensuring equity and problem-based learning using our newest toolkit. Next Wednesday, May 31st, Inspiring Courage to Excel Through Self-Efficacy with our other new toolkit, so lots of exciting new resources available. And then on June 8th, we'll have an overview of NAEP's services and resources as we close this fiscal year and move into the next fiscal year. And so with that, I'd like to turn the baton back over to Freda to close out our day together today, and want to thank our presenters again and thank all of those who were able to participate with us today and those who join us via recording later. So thank you.
I thank everyone, and thank you for the whole group that presented. We have a survey that Greg will upload now or put up, and hope that you can fill out the evaluation so that we have feedback about the webinar. Thank you. Greg?
Thank you, Freda. So I've just turned on the survey. So most people will have the survey open as a tab in your browser. And if you have time right now, we'd like you to fill that out for us. If you don't have time, I'll be sending the survey link in an email shortly, so you can do it later. Also, just to let you know that this webinar has been recorded and will be available as archive form, and you can get that off of the napeequity.org website. So thank you all, and this is the end of the webinar.
And Greg, mine has not popped up. Is that happening for anyone else?
Sometimes,
Normally
yeah,
it does.
it won't. It did for me, but if not, you can click on the webinar evaluation survey on the left-hand side under the key links and click the Browse To button. I will also put the link in the chat box in case you want to use it down there. You can click on it.
Thank you.
Or like I said, it'll also come in an email. Okay, thank you.